welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an incredible guest, Jake von Scherrer. Jake is a career educator and a certified master athletic administrator for over 50 years of experience and success as a teacher, a head coach, and as an AD. He is also the host of the Educational AD podcast. It is my absolute honor to welcome Jake von Scherrer.
Well, Courtney, thanks so much for having me on. I've been following your podcast since you got started, and you've had some tremendous guests. A lot of pressure here. I don't know if I'm in that category, but thanks for having me.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, Jake. You know, I have to give you so much credit, as well as Dr. Megan Bunning, because I can remember it's almost coming up on a year now that I graduated. And I remember Dr. Megan Bunning posting a very kind message, probably just reposting a graduation photo or something. And I remember you commenting on it. And from that point on, you had reached out to be on your podcast. And I was beyond honored to be on a podcast that would be at the time my first podcast. And I was also developing the business too, beginning in January. And I'm trying to think of how can I piece this all together? I love talking about life lessons, career experiences, and sport experiences, but how can I relay that message? Oh, wait, I'm going to be on a podcast. So the whole podcasting literally came from you obviously in inviting me on your podcast, but then encouraging me to then start the podcast. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. And Megan was on, or Dr. Megan Bunning from Florida State University. She was on the podcast as a guest. She became one of our regular contributors on Wednesday Wisdom, and she introduced me to you. And I'm going, wow, this is great background. It's all Megan or Courtney. It's all very selfish on my part. I'm just looking for great guests, and so you came on, you knocked it out of the park, and I think right then and there, I invited you to join our Wednesday Wisdom team. So thank you.
No, thank you so much, Jake. Well, I want to jump right into it. You deserve, like I said, so much credit because you're always highlighting other people and their stories. So I'm so excited to have you today. So let's go ahead and just begin with an introduction and a background of yourself, Jake.
My life story in 2 minutes. I was born and raised in the great state of Oregon. Went to high school right across the river from Portland, Oregon, in a small town in Washington, but went to college, small college in Oregon, started my teaching and coaching career. Met another teacher coach during track season, and we got married. Had some kids, started coaching at the college level, and bounced around the country. We went from Oregon, both of us and our family. Went to Missouri for a few years. We were up in Vermont. We were in North Florida for a short season. Went out to San Jose, California for a few years. We were in Arkansas, and we enjoyed the college experience. It was great, but our kids were starting to get to that high school level. We wanted them to be able to go to a school for all 4 years and make those lifelong friends. And there was a small private Christian school in Florida. They were looking for an athletic director. They were looking for a head football coach. They were looking for a gal PE teacher who could also coach cross country and track. I'm going, wow, that sounds like us. And so we've pretty much been in Florida since 2001. We both retired. I had 41 years in. Jan had 40. We retired, I guess now, 4 years ago. And now we try to stay active as officials for high school and college events. I started the podcast. Jan just started her own podcast. So I guess you could say it's in our blood. And, we're looking, we call this our chapter 3. We had our kids, we had our career. So now this is chapter 3. We'll see where it takes us.
No, that's wonderful, Jake. Thank you so much for that introduction. And congratulations, of course, on retirement. But just like you said, you're still going and you're giving back so much. of course, just to the athletic community as a whole. Those tips, those pieces of advice. So I'm so excited to get into your podcast, but I would love to start from the beginning. And I know obviously you had mentioned it too as well, but let's start from your college experience. So you received a bachelor's degree in health and physical fitness, and you were also a member of the varsity team for football and track. So, what were some lessons, maybe just in general, that college provided you that would really help you as you propelled forward into your professional career?
Oh gosh, I was just high school and college. I was blessed with just some great coaches, some great role models. Even our department chair, as an undergraduate in the, I don't even think they have this anymore. Health and physical education. Now it's sport management or
Yes.
sport science, but back in the old PE major days, Judy Sherman, she was the softball coach, the volleyball coach at our small college. She encouraged me. She goes, Jake, take those courses. I think there were 3 or 4 of them to have that health minor. And I'm going, I don't know if I want to do that. She goes, trust me, do it. And because I had that health minor, um, I think 3 of my first 5 jobs were a result of that. They in Oregon and Washington, where I was teaching at the time, they needed a PE teacher, but the state also required that you teach health, and you had to have that health minor. So, thank you, Dr. Sherman, for nagging me in a good way to get that health minor. And I've done that to my own student athletes, my own kids. Add that minor, add that endorsement. You never know when it's going to come in handy. Um, and I guess the lessons from athletics, from football, and I was a hurdler mostly, and ran on the relays, that sort of thing. But just the camaraderie that comes through being a member of a team. We competed hard. We weren't conference champions or anything like that, but I just remember how much fun it was. The practices, the road trips, etc. And that's what I tried to bring to my teams as a coach. Yeah, we want to win, and I think we had our share of success as a football coach or as a track coach. But it was all about, hey, isn't this fun? Not everybody gets to do this, but we get to do this.
No, absolutely. And I love what you say just about how your experience as an athlete, you would be able to transfer over some lessons and the way that you coach. And just as you mentioned, of course, you have coached at basically almost all levels, junior high, high school, and at the collegiate level, where you won an award for Coach of the Year. So big congratulations. But as far as the lessons too, as you would move into coaching, what are some maybe lessons that physically you learned from being an athlete that you would transfer over as a coach?
Um, well, when you asked the question, this is what first came to mind. In high school, I was a lazy track runner. I was on the football team, basketball, and track. But when I got to college, I think I had a little more confidence in track. And so I was excelling in the hurdles. But our coach had me and another teammate do the decathlon. And it was fun from it was a variety of events. You were doing something different almost every day, but participating in those throws and the jumps and the pole vault and things like that, it allowed me later on to teach, basic entry level skills to our athletes. And then fortunately we had somebody that, was a throws expert or a pole vault expert, and I could step away from that. But just having that rudimentary knowledge of how to get a kid started, maybe in junior high, and then they could refine those skills later on, that really made an impact on me. And you don't realize that at the time, but looking back, you can say, hey, that was really important. I'm glad I did that.
No, wonderful. And just to transition, still keeping on to the topic of coaching, what was maybe one special memory that really stands out throughout your coaching career?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just again, the relationships that you have. When we came to Florida, we were at a school. It was a fairly it had been a middle school for a long time, K through 8, and they had just had the high school going for maybe a year or two. And the same is true with all of the sports. The coaches worked hard, the kids worked hard, and we went from that team that was just getting their butts kicked those first couple years to participating in the playoffs and winning those games. Um, I remember those first couple years in football. Um, I would always schedule an opponent for our final game of the season that I was pretty confident we could win because those early years I knew we weren't going to go to the playoffs and I wanted us to have that positive experience. And
Mhm.
it generally it worked out. Well, as we started building, and the skinny freshmen are now seniors, and they've been working out for 4 years. Hey,
Sure.
we qualified for the playoffs, and boy,
Wow.
this is exciting. Well, we ended up we lost that playoff game,
Mhm.
and I had a mom come up to me afterwards and she goes, "Oh, it's so sad that we had to end on a loss." And I said, "No, no, no, you don't understand. We're not that team anymore. Okay. We're always going to end with a loss until we win that state championship game. So, this is good. Yeah, we got beat, but and you could see the realization, on her eyes. And she wasn't the only one, but I still remember that after the end of the game, how she came up. So yeah, it's just helping kids, helping parents sometimes appreciate what's going on.
No, I love that. And as you were speaking, something that came to mind was just, and you had mentioned it, but how you could learn so much from one season transitioning into the next. And I could remember feeling like so hungry to take on that next year if you did not make or did not win a national championship, that you would come in that next year just like fired up. And I think that's what I always took from like the beginning of the season because that's when, of course, it's preseason, you're training, you're conditioning, strength and conditioning training and everything. And it could be tough. But I think when you like come in hungry, I do believe like that could really propel you through that preseason and then just fired up for like the next season, ready to go. So I'm glad you mentioned that though. And just like the positive, of course, perspective that you had to talk to parents, not only the athletes, and motivate them, of course, for the next season. And so, speaking of parents, I'm really curious. Like I said, you've been through every different level as a coach, coaching. Now, when you came upon parents that were maybe heavily involved in their child's or maybe young adults athletic journey, how would you cope with that if they were almost maybe very involved, should I say, versus allowing the child or the young adult to really just enjoy the sport? Like, what was your perspective on handling those types of situations?
Well, it certainly changed over the course of my career. I
Mhm.
can say probably the first 25 or more years, it was very much, old school. Hey, parents, thanks. You stay in your lane. We've got this covered. And maybe not even expressing it with that much
Mhm.
positivity.
Sure.
Um, uh, uh, I had again, mentors, the philosophy of leadership in athletics changed. And, being a part of our state association and our national association, I was able to, see as an observer, as a student, if you
Mhm.
will, and even become part of that change. I was
Sure.
part of the original authorship team through our national AD organization for one of the courses, which was
Mhm.
literally called partnering with parents, as opposed to dealing with parents or managing parents. It was
Sure.
intentional, partner with parents. And it wasn't one of the phrases that we used was, we're not giving the parents the keys to the car. but they're along for the ride because of their kids. So let's try to make it a positive ride, particularly for the kid. And oh, by the way, maybe for the parent. So helping parents find their role. And, it's not a magic elixir or a magic wand that all the parent challenges went away, but it's acknowledging in this day and age, parents are going to be involved. And that's a good thing. They can bring some very positive aspects to your program as a coach or as an AD, but helping them see and find and enjoy their role as a parent. You're not a coach. You're
Right.
not an official. Don't be yapping at the officials out there. But let's enjoy your child's experience. I look at my own parents 100 years ago. They came to my games and they supported me, but it never occurred to them in a million years to go up to one of my coaches and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? It was my experience. And they were letting me live that. Again, it's things come in, changes come in waves. And right now, I think we're in a pretty good spot as far as our profession, where we are trying to partner with parents. I know that was a long answer. Yeah.
No, and I love the detail because I think from when I was physically in sport, particularly within the sport of gymnastics, I could remember my father was very like kind of hands off. Like, I mean, we would have conversations, of course, in the car, driving home, getting ready to do homework and everything, like late at night. But I always remember him kind of removed and not in a distant way. Like, I don't care what you're doing, Court, but I think it was more the idea of allowing me, now that I reflect back, on just enjoying sport. I loved gymnastics. I fell in love with it. And you mentioned it even too before, but how important like the relationship building is in sport in general. Those girls were basically my sisters growing up because I didn't have any siblings. And so it was almost as if they were your second family. And from the family atmosphere to the sport itself, I enjoyed it so much. And it was always helpful to kind of come home to somebody who was so supportive of me in sport, but not necessarily pressuring me to obtain that next skill or to get to that next level. Whereas I also saw parents who were there, I mean, 5, 6 hours. And so I saw the differentiation of mentality from the parent's point of view to the athlete just throughout the years. And so, as we move forward, just from parents in general talking as a topic, of course, with sport, I want to pick your brain more so on the leadership styles of coaching and how that has evolved within sport throughout the years.
Well, I guess I can look back at my own coaches again. I joke 100 years ago. I was in high school. I went to high school and college in the decade of the 70s. And so uh, when I got out of college and I started coaching, 1980, 81, I coached the way that I was coached. And it was kind of, hard ass and, my
Yeah,
way or the highway and that type of thing. I wasn't, abusive or anything
sure.
like that. But
Absolutely.
um, uh, even back then, um, there was, I think, a feeling that kids needed sports,
Mhm.
that and there wasn't as many alternatives. Um, a few years later, even into the 90s, when I was in high school, there was no soccer. Okay. There was, there was no lacrosse. This was on the West Coast.
Sure.
It was a very basic, traditional for the last, whatever, 40 years of
Mhm.
sports, basketball, baseball, football. We had track in the spring. We had tennis. There was cross country. There was wrestling. We didn't have a pool at our school. We were a pretty big school, but that was it. So fast forward, there's not only more sports, so now kids can play soccer. Oh, you're gonna play soccer? You should be on the football team. But also there were video games, there were skateboards, and all these other things that kids could do, gymnastics,
Mhm.
um, where they didn't it wasn't so much, I'm gonna say life and death, that they didn't play football, basketball, baseball, because there were other ways that they could feel good about themselves, have good self-esteem, do something physical. I'll never forget this. It was 1987. I'd just been hired, actually, Jan and I, we'd just been hired at this school in Southern Oregon. She's gonna be the cross-country coach, I was gonna be the football coach. And we had just moved there, had a newborn, and I'm driving to school in whatever it was, July, for that first meeting with football players and parents. And I'm
Mhm.
pulling into the parking lot, and here's this kid, tall, lanky kid, riding a skateboard. And he's got, hair down to his shoulders, which was not an issue. I had long hair, I had a ponytail when I was in high school, but he had, the lightning bolt shaved on the side of his head. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, a skateboarder, you got to be kidding me. And we get into the meeting, long story short, um, kid's a junior, just a great kid. He was one of our captains. He started as a wide receiver, was all county. His senior year, he became our starting quarterback. He was just a great kid. But here I am going, oh, geez, a skateboarder when I first see him. But um, it changed. And I think smart coaches changed with the times. I'll tell you one more story and then I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Fast forward to when we came to Florida, 2001, my quarterback, skinny kid, but great kid, and he started for us for 3 years. His personality really meshed with mine. Andy,
Mhm.
you got to do this, and I need you to get in there. And he just loved that. He thrived on that, and he helped take us to the playoffs. He graduates. He goes off to college. The kid that takes his place as a quarterback is just a monster athlete, just great. He was a linebacker. We put him at quarterback. Long story short, um, the first time I did that to him in summer, 7-on-7 passing, I'm just looking at him and he's just wilting. And this guy's a monster. And it took me most of the summer to figure out that I had to coach him a different way. Now, Dan, this is what I need you to do. And I'm just being calm and I can just feel the veins, bursting on my forehead as I'm trying to keep it together because that's what he needed. He needed me to be a calmer coach. And again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I think good coaches figure that out. Don't coach them the way you want to, coach them the way that they need to be coached to be successful.
No, absolutely. And speaking about coaching, I think something that I could certainly relate to that you were speaking about was when I was growing up. This was like early 2000s as far as like elite level gymnastics, but the type of coaching, um it was definitely more authoritarian style coaching, and it was literally what you were talking about, but it's do as I say and just don't ask questions. And I thrived off of that. And there was no like sense of abuse, like, verbally or, psychologically or, physically by any means. But it was this sense of like direct feedback that I enjoyed because I already had that intrinsic motivation for the sport. I loved the sport of gymnastics. So that was never the issue or the, problem. I think what it was though was that style of coaching I resonated with. And granted, yes, like that was all I knew back then. So I didn't have it to compare to. But then throughout the years, it almost seems that you had to evolve with the times if you came from that particular time frame, because coaching in general and the style leadership styles of coaching, I think, has definitely made a like kind of an adaptation to more of listening to the athlete. Also, just the way of motivation, I think, could be viewed almost in some cases as like a way of a healthier way of motivating for the athlete. So I was curious what your thoughts are with coaching present day athletes, and that could be at any level.
Well, you're absolutely right. It certainly it can be a challenge, and it's not it's not the kid's fault. It's, guess what? It's the influence of parents that have tried to, in their desire and hope to help their child,
Yeah.
they've actually ended up, I think, hurting them by trying to remove any chance of failure or any chance of a negative experience, not understanding that
Mhm.
that's how we get better. Okay. Courtney,
Mhm.
you know this. I was a NAI, like a D3 athlete. You are a Division I All-American. How
Oh,
do you become that good? Through busting your butt,
yeah.
through failure and getting up and trying
Mhm.
again and then failing and overcoming that next obstacle. And so many parents just don't understand that. They want to protect their child. And I get it. I got
Sure.
3 kids. They're all in their 30s, but they're still your kids. Uh,
Absolutely.
and that's what the coach is there for. And the last, I'll say, 9 to 10 years of my AD career, that was one of the messages I tried to share with parents is our coaches, they care about your kids. Now they're not trying to take your place. You're the parent, but
Yeah.
on the court, on the field, in the pool, hey, they're the ones that we need your kids listening to. They're the ones that are trying to help your kids to get better. Most of our parents, they got it, they understood it.
Mhm.
Parents being parents, there were some that needed a little extra attention. But um, I would tell parents as a football coach, I said, "You're gonna hear me before you see me. I'm loud, but listen," and I would tell the kids the same thing. "Don't listen to my volume. Listen to what I'm telling you. I'm giving you instruction. I'm giving you encouragement." One of my favorite cliches, I'll see a kid in the mall or at Disney, and, they've got their own kids, and they'll parrot this back. "I know you can do better. I saw you do it yesterday in practice." And, yeah, I'm yelling my butt off, but I'm yelling encouragement because I want them to know that I do care. That was just my personality. So again, you don't want to be, oh, you piece of crap, get out of here. That's
Right.
not what coaching is about. But hey, gymnastics, it's not for the faint of heart. Football, these sports, it requires some grit, some determination, and that's our job as coaches to figure out the best way to get it out of our student athletes.
No, thanks so much for that, Jake. And, I think it really is something that I noticed evolve as far as just the coaching style throughout the years. And I did have a question for you when you were talking specifically about parents. It just popped into my mind. Do you believe that parents have become maybe even more involved because of the level of competitiveness to then, the opportunity to go to a D1 school, a D2, D3 for my son or daughter? Do you think that like added pressure almost for the parent made them more involved throughout the years? I'm just curious about your thoughts about that.
I mean, it's a great question. And I don't know if there's a definitive answer because I think for all those parents that you just described, we're going to, spend, millions, because I think it does turn into millions of dollars over the course of their student's life, millions of dollars for club fill in the blank, volleyball, soccer, basketball, etc. Um, and with the goal of getting that college scholarship or going pro or whatever, I think there's just as many parents
Mhm.
who are, and I don't mean this in a snarky way, but they're just completely clueless
Yeah.
about the college and the pro and pathway because it's just so far removed from their experience. It used to be back in my day, parents had been on teams.
Mhm.
Even moms had played high school sports, and now I think that's definitely the minority. They
Mhm.
maybe they played some club sports, but as you know, kids are dropping out of sports in epidemic numbers. So the parent participation when they were in school isn't there anymore, and they just don't get it. So I
Mhm.
think there's certainly those let's call them highly involved. high maintenance parents. They're more visible now.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's any more of them. I really want to say I think the pendulum is slowly swinging away from that, but they are still out there. I still have many friends that are active ADs and coaches, and they share their amusing anecdotes with it. Um, Here, I'm going to share this one with you. There's a great video on YouTube, and I use it in some of my presentations. It's about a minute and a half,
Mhm.
and it describes exactly what we've been talking about. It's a mom at a high school basketball game, and her son is playing. And the name of the video, it's called Del Sol, DELSOL. That's the name of the high school, Del Sol Mama. Uh, I won't explain it to you, but I'm going to encourage you and the listeners, just check it out on YouTube, Del Sol Mama. And would you do that as a parent? Okay. Has that ever happened at your school where your kid is playing? And this is basketball, but it could have been soccer, football, anything else. That's not the role for that parent. That parent has passion. And I tell them my presentation, I want that parent at my school, but it's my job to help her find the right role for her and for her kid. That video is, and nobody's harmed, nobody, there's no bloodshed, but it's just, are you kidding me? Del Sol Mama.
No, thanks for that, Jake. And it just reminds me, it like allows me to reflect upon sport. To me was everything growing up. I mean, it was my passion. It taught me so many life lessons that I would, of course, take with me forward into my career, into my life in general. But I I almost like it makes me so sad to hear sometimes when kind of around that high school time, maybe like 13, 14, 15 years of age, where at least for me, I remember I stopped the sport of gymnastics and then I returned. Basically, that was my like senior year. But you see a lot of athletes at that particular point in life kind of go away from sport. And you mentioned that there is a decline in more of youth sports. So could you maybe elaborate on maybe why that is?
Well, again, been a number of studies over the years, and um, students in that junior high, even high school age, are polled, and among the questions, do you do sports? If you don't do sports, why not? And overwhelmingly, the answer is, I don't do sports, or I left sports because it wasn't fun anymore. And for that junior high kid that leaves sports after 8th grade because their coach is um, just an a-hole, uh, and never gets a chance
Mhm.
to develop as a 9th grader, a 10th grader, never gets a chance to experience a great freshman coach, JV coach, varsity coach down the road. I think those sometimes those are the kids that grow up and they either don't let their kids do sports, or they're that high maintenance parent that's trying to protect their child from the experience they had, which I feel bad for that kid, now an adult. But yeah, it's very it's very easy. They quit because it's not fun anymore. Sports should be fun.
And I think, there's definitely that balance because I remember at some of the highest levels, once I reached level 10, elite level gymnastics, I mean, yes, every day going to practice was not, just a bunch of balloons and celebration by any means. But it was so interesting because I had that passion, that burning desire. I mean, even when I did return back to the sport, I loved practices at the collegiate level. It was all about the team. And so when I do hear about that, when athletes, remove themselves from sport because of sometimes it was the coach or sometimes they weren't having fun, I just think about everything that I was so fortunate to gain from sport, the life lessons, the friendships, kind of that sisterhood, like I said, for me. So I appreciate just your insight and of course like expertise in that area. But I want to move forward. This is so exciting. So Jake, you have so much experience in athletics. I want to talk about your time as an athletic director and a head football coach, which I believe you were for almost, I think, 20 years, I believe it was. So I'd love to hear all of your experience and just knowledge in that position.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was a head football coach very young, and the expression "you don't know what you don't know" that
Mm.
certainly applied to me as a new and even into my career coach. I was very fortunate, though. I had some great veteran assistants that were there to coach their position and also occasionally go, Jake, are you sure you want to do that? Have you thought about this? And so I was, and I was very willing to take their knowledge, to take
Mhm.
their input. I think that was one of my gifts, is that I was able to see this person's smarter than me. This person knows a little bit more than me, and because of that, yeah. And you mentioned it. I was able to pick up a couple of Coach of the Year honors along the way. I had great assistants. We had great kids. I just happened to be the head coach. Um, I think uh, being in a high school program for football that won 3 games in 3 years, uh, and we wanted to win. It just didn't happen for us. But I never remembered anybody saying, "Oh, this sucks," or "Coach, is awful." It was always, "Hey, we're going to work hard. We play. Sometimes it might be a close game. Sometimes it was not. But hey, who we playing next week? Oh, it's Fort Vancouver High School. Oh, we hate those guys. Let's go." And it was always a fun experience. And so, as a coach, I didn't know any better, or I didn't know any different. And so that's what I was trying to create for the kids. I didn't invent this. I'm sure I stole it from somebody, but we had this little cheer, and I would yell after we warmed up, football is, and the kids would go, fun. And then I would say, but winning, and they would say, is more fun. And
Aw.
the message was, we're going to do the things that winners do. In school, we're going to get to class on time. We're going to sit up front. We're going to have our materials. We're going to ask questions. We're going to be, a positive student for the teachers. Football, we're going to be in practice. We're going to have our gear. We're going to work hard. We're going to encourage our teammates. We're not going to pick on the freshmen. We need that freshman because we were a small school. We need those kids to want to be on this team, to want to save your butt with a game-saving tackle when it's on the line. So winning was more fun, but football was all those things that I think sometimes parents look at in a negative way. The hitting the sled and the up downs, the grass drills and the sprints and getting knocked down and getting back up again. That's football. And football's fun, but winning is more fun. And so we will do the things that winners do. So I guess that's what I guess if I'm proud of something, I'm proud that, we had that experience. You know, I wish I would have been more of a, and it was always about the team. I wish I would have done a better job of building individual relationships with
Sure.
players. I was, aloof. I was distant, because that's what I knew. That's how my coaches coached me, and I love my coaches. But I wish I would have been a little more relational on an individual basis.
No, that's wonderful. And you make me reflect back on just the concept of winning, but what it teaches you, like through that journey to reach that, championship. But all that hard work, I could distinctively remember in college, we would, of course, especially like I said, in preseason, we'd have strength and conditioning on top of practice and class and everything else. But those practices were some of the hardest strength and conditioning sessions I think I have ever experienced in my life. I remember like sliding down the stairmaster literally because you're just like dripping. But the reason I say that is when you won, like we won the 2007 SEC championship and the 2010 SEC championship, you look back at those days when you were like, how am I going to wake up tomorrow and just keep going once again? It made it all worthwhile. You're like, yeah, I'll get back on that Stairmaster and slide back down again. So it does. It teaches you just that grit and determination. And as we all know, of course, once you get into your professional career, it's so translatable, right? You could relate to that athletic career and what it taught you, those lessons. So I'm so happy that you mentioned that, just like the work ethic. But something I wanted to ask you was, did you always know that you wanted to become an athletic director?
Um, I don't think I ever had a conscious thought of becoming an AD or wanting to become an AD. For me, it was always about coaching.
Mhm.
I want to coach. Oh, hey, this is pretty fun. I want to be a head coach. I want to coach at a bigger school. Different challenges, things like that. Um, my first AD job, it really, I mean, I applied for it, but it just kind of fell into my lap. And I was still a head football coach and an AD, so I could wean myself on the coaching experience. But it was never a goal. But I think it's probably one of those things where it was a good fit for me and my skill set, maybe even better than as a head football coach.
No, that's fantastic. And like once you were in that athletic director position, maybe that first job, second job, what was something that really stood out to you that was quite the surprise? Like you wish somebody would have told you, "Hey, Jake, be aware of this."
Well, I guess the first, let's say the first real AD job was at that small school that was just getting started, making that transition from junior high to high school programs. And we had some great coaches, some veteran coaches, some younger coaches, but I was still in that, this is how we're going to do things. There wasn't a lot of collaboration. I had my vision. This is how we're going to
Mhm.
go. And we had some success. And I think for the 8 years that I was there, um, we grew and I grew.
Yeah.
My next job, I was only the athletic director, and that I don't know if I already mentioned this. I was hired, and the the head of the school was another private school. His comment to me was, "Jake, that athletic department is the Wild West. They need a new sheriff." And so I came on even stronger. Um, and again, we had some success. We had some state championships. The teams did well. Um, but it, it I guess looking back, I don't know. I had fun, but I don't know if it was, like a peak experience. And I'm sure it wasn't a peak experience for some of the coaches that I worked with.
Yeah.
Long story short, when I got hired at the McClay School in Tallahassee, you certainly know the McClay School being up there in
Mhm.
Tallahassee. They had been great for years. They didn't need me at all. I was very fortunate that they asked me to come and be their AD for the rest of my career. While I was there, I managed to not drive it off the rails. But I got hired in February. I reported for work in June, and I sent out an email to every single coach, head coach, assistant coach, middle school coach, probably close to 90 coaches. Hey, I'm Jake, new AD. I'm excited to meet you. Please come in my office this summer. Just want to say hi and get to know you.
Aw.
Almost every single coach came in, and this is what I asked them. And I didn't invent this. Thank goodness I stumbled on it. But when they were in, I asked them this question: what can I do for you to make your job more fun? to let you experience the fun things about coaching. Can I take some paperwork off your desk? Can I help you, or can I do your scheduling for you? Certainly, yeah, you're going to give me input, but I'll do all that. I'll schedule the buses. I'll do your student athlete data entry, which they were doing at the time. Nobody likes to do that, but I'm not teaching. I'm not coaching. I've got time on my hands. What can I do to make your job more fun? And that, along with being there and supporting them, and for the next months and years, being their AD. But that event, I had 3 coaches who had been there for many years, and either while I was at Maclay or in the first or second year after I retired, all 3 of them were inducted into either the coach or the FHSA Hall of Fame. So they're pretty good coaches. But that first year, all 3 of them came up to me at different times and said, nobody ever asked us that before. Okay. And it just, with everybody, I began to hear and see, it gave me a lot of credibility for coming in with that type of attitude. How can I help you, as opposed to, we're going to do it my way. And so I, I, I think, had I taken that same approach at the other schools, we would have been just successful, and probably even more successful than my, hard ass approach.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's what's so interesting about building a team, like that type of leadership style, being open to hear, maybe like you said, you were asking them, like, what can I do for you? Almost that sense of like servant leadership, almost like how to serve your team. But then in return, it almost, like, I could remember in different parts of my life, whether it was in my professional career or coach, like when I was open, or the opportunity was that I was open to speak to the coach and share, like you said, like, I mean, even just feedback, but then also moving into the next year, hearing your own feedback. It makes, I think, this, the dynamic and the relationship so much open-minded, and also willing to change and adapt different things, versus, like you said, just like one way communication, where it's just like, basically, I'm telling you what to do and you have to go do it. So that's so interesting. And obviously it led to a tremendous amount of success for you, Jake. And I was curious, from the time that you actually began as an athletic director to maybe your last stint as an AD, what did you see maybe change?
In me, or in the profession?
Just in the profession.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think in Florida, those 20 plus years I was an AD here in Florida, just the growth of all sports in general, adding sports over the years, lacrosse and flag football for girls, and seeing other sports, increase in popularity. Seen, and again, you've met my wife, Jan, seen more women in coaching and leadership roles. It certainly, was a positive change.
Sure.
We're not done. Let's not be satisfied. Let's be happy, but let's keep improving in that area. I think from an AD perspective, and this was already in place, but it's not just scheduling games and setting up the gym and meeting with coaches. Now it's, you are expected to, in a good way, have relationships with kids, build relationships with parents, at the private school level, sponsorships and things like that. Technology, all the different, we talked about scheduling, all the apps that are available for scheduling and scores and results, communication apps, the challenges of social media. 10 years ago, I think most ADs would have said, social media? Now, I think every school in America has a social media policy, because of various missteps that a student athlete taking their cell phone in the locker room and taking pictures. No, we have to have a policy for that. I guess so. But those are those ancillary things that are, I guess, no longer ancillary. That's part of the main job. That's what I've seen change.
No, that's wonderful. And I can't wait to dive into your podcast now. So, Jake, you have been involved with the Educational AD podcast, which of course you host, and you've done that since 2020. So, I would love to hear all about just the journey of podcasting for you.
All right. Again, I'll try to condense 4 years into 60 seconds. Um, Going back to my time at McClay,
Mhm.
it was 2020. It was the COVID was just around the corner. So I guess it might have been 2019.
Mhm.
I was the president-elect of our state AD association, and the only job of the president-elect is to organize that year's state conference. And so my conference was ready to go. We had keynotes, we had workshops, we had everything. And then COVID hits. And like everybody else, our state conference ended up getting canceled. Well, there was this new thing called Zoom. And I got the idea, well, what if we did some Zoom presentations with the people that were going to present workshops? And long story short, we ended up, this was April now, we did a total of 20 Zoom workshops. And people are going, Zoom, what's Zoom? We did 2 a day for 2 weeks. And we didn't charge for it. We just social media, sent out emails and Facebook posts and things like that. Hey, tune in. Here's the login, all this stuff, just crazy stuff. And we had about 1,000 people over the course of the 2 weeks from across the country, and we had some internationals log into these sessions. And it was just a lot of fun. It was great for our state association. It was great for our profession. We had some great speakers, and we had a lot of fun with that. A couple weeks later, I get contacted by these two athletic directors in Georgia, Don Baker and Josh Matthews. They are high school ADs. Back in, I think, November or December, leading into COVID, they had started a podcast. And I'm going, what's a podcast? Called Hangin', Hangin', Hangin' with the AD. And they would interview athletic directors and coaches and things like that. They asked me to come on. And well, Jake, tell us a little bit about your school. Jake, tell us about this Zoom project you did. And I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. This is fun to talk about your school and your program. And I got to thinking, I could do this for our Florida athletic directors, because now, starting in the fall, I'm going to be the president of our state AD association. This could be like a presidential project. So long story short, I call up some ADs that I know, people on our board, et cetera. Hey, you want to be on my podcast? And we interviewed them. I think we posted our first episode. Gosh, I can't remember, June, July. And I think after a month or so, we had maybe 14 listeners. Since then, we're heard in all 50 states. We're heard in 93 countries around the world. We get downloaded about 2,000 times a week. And I think for our little niche, that's pretty good. And the podcast has led to a couple of books, and I enjoy the interviews. And we have some stars. We have some big names like Dr. Megan Budding and Dr. Dr. Courtney Beck. And we've had professional athletes. We've had Hall of Fame athletic directors and coaches. We've done over 600 interviews. We've done over 1,000 segments. But I think what I pride myself on is maybe two things. Is our guests are largely, I call them lunch pail, rank and file athletic directors, people that might not get to share their story on somebody else's big national platform, but their story is just as important as those, let's say, those A-listers. And then the other thing, out of those 1,000 segments, over half of them have featured women leaders just like you. And I think that's important to help, move the needle a little bit. So,
Jake, thanks so much. And I had a laugh when you said my name, because I think, like, first off, I was so honored and humbled when you first asked me to be on the podcast, because truth be told, that was my very first podcast that I had ever been on. And you you may make your guest so comfortable. Like, I remember I was so nervous to get on, and I really didn't know what to expect. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember thinking, okay, am I still on camera when he goes to cut for, his advertisements, his sponsorships and stuff? Like, I didn't know the process whatsoever, never did it before. But you put your guest just in a situation where it's just so comfortable, and then we're back on air. And from that point, I was thinking, I love to hear people's stories because I really do believe we could learn so much from, and even like the relatability factor, I think is so important, that when you see somebody at like their current position, but actually it took 20, 30, 40 years to get there. What did that process look like? It probably, I would have to go out on the line, it probably wasn't all sunshine and roses. And so I think that could really motivate people and inspire people to go after their own dreams, and to know, like, yes, it's not going to be smooth, trail the whole way. There's going to be, bumps along the road, but to hear other stories, I think so inspiring. And so I'm so curious, Jake, once you got into podcasting, what is something that you just truly enjoy about podcasting?
Well, for me, again, you just said it. It's meeting the people. It's hearing their story, seeing that. This will sound kind of rainbows and butterflies, but we're far more alike than we are different. Boy,
Mhm.
nobody's ever said that before. But I just I like it, and I think I think the podcast, and yours very much so in the same vein. I think we do a service to our listeners. We're providing um, experiences. We're providing perspective. We're providing tips and tools, if you will, so
Mhm.
they or somebody listening can do their job better. The first couple years I did the podcast, I would hear this so frequently. Boy, I wish this had been around 10 years ago, or with some of the
Yeah,
older guys like me or women
sure.
20 years ago. And so I think we do provide a service, and I joke, I'm as long as people keep listening, I'm going to keep doing the interviews because I enjoy them. Somebody put on a podcast column, or not a column, but
Mhm.
a survey or something. Well, Jake's podcast, it's a good podcast, but Jake asks the same questions week after week, and I'm thinking, well, for me, yeah, it's the same questions, but for the guests, it's their first time. Okay. And so, and I try not to ambush people with, hey, what's your take on this? No, they know the questions in advance. It's not like a
Mhm.
state secret, but um, it, I remember how much fun I had on that very first podcast. I'm going to say it again, with Don Baker and Josh Matthews. And I want people to hopefully have that same amount of fun.
No, thank you so much for that. Just insight, because Jake, your podcast, like I said, you make people feel comfortable to be on it, but such a great experience that, like I said, you encouraged me and motivated me to start my own podcast. And when you first start a podcast, at least from my point of view, it can be a little bit nerve wracking, especially if you don't have all those like technical skills you learn along the way. And so, like, just having a podcast, when you were speaking about providing a service, I think for the podcast that I'm doing, I am all about community building. Like you said, for the relatability factor, I think really should be like that, just that message amplified, because I think a lot of the times we think sometimes we're the only person, going through those difficult times, when in fact, when you hear or able to hear other people's stories, it could at least like ease that, thought process or that sense of anxiety, like, okay, I'm not the only one, and I can make it through. I can make it to the end to, achieve that goal, or, whatever you had set out for. So, no, once again, just to the audience, Jake's podcast is the Educational AD Podcast, and I highly, highly recommend it. Because, Jake, just to your point, you had said it before, but could you please elaborate on the type of guests that you have on your podcast?
Well, thank you for those kind words. I do want to comment on something you mentioned. Um, athletic directors are almost always, they're the only they're the only AD in the building. And there's nobody for them to go to. Teachers can talk to other teachers. Coaches can talk to other coaches. Even principals, they can talk to assistant principals or the superintendent. But ADs are often, they feel like they're on an island. And that's something that I've heard a number of times is that, hey, I didn't realize so many other people were experiencing what I was experiencing with parents or with coaches or whatever. So again, just sharing those different perspectives.
Yeah.
I forgot what your question was.
No, you're totally fine. And what's so interesting, I was even thinking as you were speaking, you had mentioned just providing value, and the way that you go about podcasting is all about allowing the guest to have those questions beforehand, and that you're not here to ambush. And when you had said that, I was thinking the same thing. I think podcasting provides at least an opportunity to bring out the best in people, to actually focus on that sense of positivity, because it's so day to day, we could find ourselves, like I said, overcoming challenges or, fighting off that negativity. And so when you're able to be a host and to really shed light on a guest and all the great things that they're doing, I think that's what really excites me about podcasting, because it's focusing on that sense of positivity. But just overall, I think in podcasting, what is, what is maybe actually something that was a challenge to you when you first started podcasting? We'll start there, Jake, even though I forgot that original question too.
Well, I often say, and I share this with other athletic directors, that, starting a podcast is so easy, even I can do it. When I got off of that podcast and had the idea, hey, I could do this, I literally went on Google, how do you do a podcast? And of course, there were a number of sites, and you have to find your host platform. I ended up choosing, it's gone through a couple of changes. It's through Spotify, but originally it was called Anchor, and then it was Spotify for podcasters, and now it just changed to creators, Spotify for creators. But find your platform. The only expense that I've ever incurred in doing the podcast is my microphone. I tried using the laptop microphone. My son, who had done some YouTube videos, listened to it and goes, "Dad, your microphone sucks. You got to get a real microphone." So this was, I think, $42 on Amazon. What is a good podcast microphone? And so that popped up. But Courtney, you and I've had this discussion before. There are a billion different podcasts out there. And you maybe your goal to a listener, maybe your goal is to get Joe Rogan type downloads. Maybe you just have a passion for a particular subject and you want to share. And Courtney, I will say this: you've been on my podcast now twice. We did your full interview, and then you're part of our Wednesday Wisdom team. It's time to get you back on again. But that first interview, yeah, again, you're, PhD, you're all-American athlete. You're everything that we want on this show. But I remember thinking, she needs a podcast. She's got a lot of energy. And so, that, if you have that, if you're a listener and you have just something you feel strongly about, and you want to share, hey, podcasting's the way to go. There are free platforms. There's also platforms you can pay a monthly fee for. Find the one that fits you and your idea, and then start sharing, your heart, sharing your wisdom, your dream, and let others come on, and you can have that conversation. I think that's what podcasting is all about.
No, Jake, thank you so much for that compliment. And I think, to your very point, when you talk about podcasting and different goals and so forth, I think one thing I have always enjoyed, and I said this obviously, but I love hearing other people's stories and building that sense of positivity, because It's about pulling people together. I love just the sense of community, and on top of that, I love the passion that I have to talk about those life lessons that we learn along the way, like sport experiences and career experiences. What actually comes of this podcast, I'm not sure. But at the same time, I think for me, every time, like I said, I get on a podcast, once I get off, it's so like I just reflect, and I love what I do now. And so you're right. You could have different goals. You could have goals to become the next Joe Rogan, as you said. Or it's just sharing your passion with others, sharing that, on here, that sense of positivity and viewing life in that positive nature to go on and to, maybe achieve your own sense of greatness. So I'm so happy that you mentioned that, just like certain goals within podcasting. And you're right. There's a ton of podcasts out there. But finding maybe that small niche that, you enjoy hearing a certain topic of conversation. I love podcasting is my point. I'm all about it. So Jake, real quick, I did not want to miss this. But within podcasting, you have created, and you are obviously an author, but you've created so many different books from the educational AD like toolkit. So could you explain to the audience what that actually is, and then how many books that you actually produced from the podcast itself?
Well, one of our topics, talking points in our podcast interviews, we call it the Athletic Director Toolbox. What are 3 tips that you would give to a brand new AD? And of course, if you're sending out a brand new anything, you'd want to give them 1,000 different tips. But over the first few episodes, people would give their tips, and we obviously the listeners would be able to hear those. I think we'd done maybe 100 or so interviews, and a friend of mine said, Jake, you should do a podcast on the toolbox. Which tool has gotten the most shout outs? And so I looked at my spreadsheet, I put it together. I had that AD, who's named Mike Elson out of Tennessee, and another athletic director, Lisa Langston out of Texas. We did a podcast show, and we took turns sharing those tools. I'd put them into 20 different categories, the top 20 tools for success. And when we had finished recording that episode, Mike said, Jake, this would be a great book. And I go, you think so? And so how do you publish a book? And the Amazon, they call it KDP, Kindle platform, Amazon Kindle Publishing, something like that. Anyway,
Sure.
it's free. Free is a very good price for me. So we took the episodes, we transcribed the audio into text. We had to convert it a little bit. When I say we, I guess I mean me. And we had the first Toolbox book come out, and that was a lot of fun. It wasn't necessarily me. In fact, it wasn't me. It was all the people who had contributed to the podcast. I kept doing interviews. We had a second edition, did a few more interviews. The third edition came out about a year ago. We're still doing interviews. So the fourth edition of the Toolbox will probably come out this time next year. We also, in addition to interviews, we do series, and we've had so far 3 series. One was called the Mentoring Minute. One featured 10 women athletic directors from Florida. They each contributed 3 segments. So that's 30 segments, 30 weeks, 30 chapters in a book. We called that one All-Star AD. We about 30 weeks ago, we finished one with an athletic director friend of mine in Georgia. She called her segments Teachable Moments, just little tips for athletic directors. Her book, and I say her book, I took all of her recordings, I transcribed them for her, I sent them to her. She proofed and made her edits. But her book, called Teachable Moments, just came out on November 21st, I think. So that's available on Amazon. And our most recent series, which we focused on small school athletic directors, city schools, country schools, but they're all small schools. That book is going to be out on Amazon probably around December 1st. So the podcast just keeps generating these books, and we try to put them out there at a very reasonable price for ADs, because I know ADs and coaches don't make a lot of money. And I also give away a ton of books to state associations to give to their brand new ADs. So if that's something you want to do, it's certainly an opportunity to do it. But for me, it just kind of happened organically.
That is so neat. And what a great story, because as you said too, it's not that you had started out like with the podcast thinking you were going to be an author and publish from the toolkit itself, but how that just naturally evolved. And so I think that I remember when I was on your podcast, I thought those were excellent questions to ask, just in general, because if in fact, of course, somebody is interested in becoming an athletic director, to have all of those, pieces of advice, tips, and whatnot, that you have that beforehand, especially in a book. Like there's nothing like so original as just holding a book. I love highlighting. I love taking notes when I do read books. So I'm all about that, Jake. But congratulations, of course, on how many books total was it that you had?
I guess really counting this new one, it'd be a total of 8 books. Yeah.
Wow. Well, big congratulations, Jake. And on a positive note that we'll end on, do you have any positive advice or perhaps a positive quote for the community?
Well, I guess talking about tools, let me go ahead and recommend my top 3 tools, and those
Mhm.
have changed over the years, and in no particular order.
Sure.
Um, Never or don't underestimate the value of networking. Introduce yourself to people. If you're attending a conference, if you're at a workshop, go up and introduce yourself when it's all done to the speaker, and just say, "Hey, thanks for presenting today. Really enjoyed it." Okay. I cannot tell you how
Mhm.
many times that introduction, and I usually use my Mickey Mouse voice. "Hey, thanks for presenting today." And "Hey, aren't you at XYZ school?" Or it's
Mhm.
developed into something. And that's not why you do it, but go out and network, sell yourself, build your own network. The
Mhm.
second tool, we've talked about it a little bit, um, relationships. Some people, this comes naturally. For me, it did not.
Mhm.
Work on developing those relationships, real, sincere, heartfelt
Mhm.
relationships. It's not easy. Okay. You got to put yourself out there, but build those relationships, professional as well as personal. And the third is, again, Courtney, you're still in chapter 1. You've got that whole career, and it's going to be it's going to be even better than it is already
Aw.
for you. I'm in chapter 3, but whatever chapter you're in,
Mhm.
make sure that you are, and again, the term is often called work-life balance. I'll tell you right now, it's never a balance, because if it is a balance, you're going to get fired. Okay. You've got to spend time at work. How about work-life compromise?
Ooh.
How can you compromise and make sure that you're not neglecting those most important people? Uh, your spouse, your partner, your kids, if you got kids, and I'm throwing in your parents. Okay. As coaches, as ADs, we should all aspire to be in the Hall of Fame. That's a good goal. Hey, I want to be in the Hall of Fame. That's not selfish. That's not narcissistic. It's, hey, I want to be remembered as one of the best. Well, here's the question to ask yourself: would your partner
Mhm.
nominate you to be in the Hall of Fame? I think my wife would. I think she might. Would your kids nominate you to be in the
Mhm.
Parent Hall of Fame? Would your parents
Mhm.
nominate you to be in the Son or Daughter Hall of Fame? Find that work life compromise, and don't neglect the things that are most important. So there's my 3 tips.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for 3 tips. And I really want to thank you for being on this podcast. I must say, from that very first time of encouraging me, really behind the scenes, you didn't even know, but you were inspiring me to create this podcast. And I'm so incredibly grateful. And I call you my mentor because you have been there when I had a question or just needed general guidance to, just keep going. You've always been there. So you are an incredible person. And I'm so, so grateful that literally I was on your podcast that one time. And that, of course, I now have you on my podcast. So it's such an exciting, like, full circle moment. But Jake, I wish you the absolute best.
Same to you, my friend. Thanks for letting me come on. And I'm going to look forward to having you back on our podcast for your next segment of Wednesday Wisdom.